Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today I'll be reviewing Vistara on their Airbus A320 business class product from Mumbai to Singapore. I'll give you a comprehensive review on the hard product, soft product, and my impressions on how they fare against competition. Before that, a quick introduction. So I'll take a moment to quickly introduce the airlines. So Vistara is a joint venture between Singapore Airlines and Tata Group, both very respected brands worldwide. And you have a sort of an expectation going in. So my trip got off to a relatively rocky start. We got an email saying that online check-in is mandatory, and after completing a very tedious check-in process, an error popped up at the end saying web check-in cannot be completed. And this is quite frustrating because flying business class, you don't expect these issues, and even flying economy, you don't want to sort of go through the entire process only for it to say there's an error at the check-in. So they said visit the front desk and manually check in. So that was already an issue going in, and it was obviously not the most pleasurable experience. Now to check-in. Check-in was a very lengthy process, even though the queue was practically non-existent for both business and economy class. Check-in took upwards of 20 to 25 minutes. And the issue was the providing of boarding passes and the checking of relevant documents required for entering Singapore. So the second part I understand, but the fact that documents including boarding passes and lounge cards took upwards of 10 minutes to be issued, that's something you would not expect when you're coming in flying business class. They had to manually write, and there's 4 of us traveling, so they had to manually write everyone's name out in the lounge cards and then issue that to us. And then they had to take it back because they forgot to write it on their main spreadsheet. So that was a very sort of underwhelming process from Vistara. We don't expect that flying business class, and you'd expect them to be the boarding cards and the lounge cards to already be written out before you get there to save time as a business class passenger. And when checking out the way, I headed over to the Adani Lounge, which is located inside the main terminal. It's a very spacious lounge that has a lot of food and beverages to offer, including Indian, Western, and Asian cuisine. I opted for some Thai green curry noodles, which were very well made, and is a great lounge if you're looking to go. And with that, I headed over to the boarding gate. Before boarding, all passengers were handed a face shield, face mask, as well as some hand sanitizer, which I think is extremely important given the magnitude of the situation. I was seated in row 1, seat 1D, and given that it's a bulkhead row, you'd obviously expect a lot of leg room, which I got in this case. The seat pitch is quite great, as well as the seat width. All passengers were also given a pre-departure drink, and I opted for some orange juice. Not sure if the same applies in economy, but all passengers in business class were given a pillow and blanket for comfort.
105 to Singapore. Flight time today is 5 hours and 10.
And with that, I'll take a quick look at Vistara's A320 business class product. So on the left, there's a panel to control the seat recline, which we'll look at later on. Next to that, there's a location, a small compartment, where they were given a water bottle to keep.
On-road weather forecast appears to be fair, but for your safety, we recommend that you always keep your seat belts fastened while seated.
And here's a quick look at the seat from frontward direction. As you can see, the seats are quite comfortable and look quite plush. However, it's important to note that the seat is not fully flat. In fact, the recline is far from adequate, as you'll see later on.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will now be commencing our safety demonstration.
Keep in mind, apart from the masks and face shields we were given, there was no additional amenity equipment, which is a bit surprising given that it's almost a 6-hour flight.
So that we can have your food and safety.
Vistara offers complimentary in-flight entertainment. However, there aren't any IFE screens in this aircraft, which is another drawback I'd like to bring up. A magazine was also placed in the seat compartment, which is a surprise now given the COVID situation. It was good to see a magazine for the first time in a while on an aircraft.
Safety features of this Vistara Airbus 320 aircraft. To fasten your seatbelt, insert the metal tip into the buckle.
So from a first impression basis, this business class product is very reminiscent to that of Silkair, which is Singapore Airlines regional wing, which is now defunct. I wouldn't be surprised to see that they've taken inspiration given that Singapore Airlines is one of the parent companies for Vistara, but it's not a very great business class if you compare it to other airlines flying the same route, including Singapore Airlines themselves. Before I forget, on the right there's a space for tray table storage, and on the left a bit more of a detailed look into the seat back controls, which as I mentioned earlier is not fully flat and is actually quite underwhelming after sleeping 4 hours on it. One thing I will say though, I'm a huge fan of these lights aboard these 737s as well as these new A320neos. And this mood lighting, especially with the brand colors of Vistara, makes it a very enjoyable experience. One thing I haven't mentioned so far is the cabin crew, and I felt the cabin crew really stood up to the expectations I had. In fact, they exceeded them. The moment we entered, the head person introduced herself as well as the lead cabin crew business class, as well as taking orders for a welcome drink, pre-post takeoff drink, as well as food orders. So from that front, Vistara really did a good job. The seat did feel a bit uncomfortable after takeoff, but I realized I'd pushed a cushion out of place for some reason and managed to fix that quickly. Now a quick look at the lavatories. It is honestly a lot smaller than what I expect in business class, but given that it is an A320, there wasn't much I could say about it. It's a pretty stock standard lavatory for that matter. So after takeoff, the crew came around and gave us our post-departure snacks and beverage. I opted for some ginger ale, which they surprisingly had on board, which was a great thing to have. On top of that, they gave us some nuts on set. Now take a quick look at the tray table. It's pretty useful given that it is quite adjustable and can be used when you're in recline mode, so it makes it a lot easier for the passenger. Without doubt, one of the most important aspects of any business class product, or any aircraft for that matter that flies such a long haul route, is their in-flight entertainment, and given this is a 6-hour flight, I expected at least a good selection of movies and TV shows on offer. Initially, there was a bit of an issue connecting to the Wi-Fi system, as it didn't seem to be operational during takeoff or before that. But once I was able to connect, I noticed a variety of movies and TV shows on offer. So as you can clearly see, a variety of different movies on offer, and definitely enough entertainment to keep everyone of all ages entertained. This is also available in economy class, and I really like the fact that we have at least some form of entertainment, even though the lack of an IFE screen is still quite interesting. I personally feel like an in-flight entertainment screen would be necessary in such a route, and I feel like Vistara needs to upgrade to having IFEs for both classes in order to be more competitive on an international level. Given the amount of food I ate at the lounge, I decided to skip dinner on board, but my next door neighbor was eating some chicken teriyaki and rice, which I was able to capture footage. You can see the food portion is quite good, and the amount of chicken is definitely something that will fill you up. The dessert also looked quite appetizing, and overall he said the meal was quite great, so I'll take his word for it. The vegetarian option also sounded quite great, which was some lemon rice and sambar, and I would have definitely had that had I had more space in my stomach. And after dinner service, the cabin crew dimmed the cabin lights, and I prepared to head out for a nap. You notice the window getting stuck over there, and I really had to force it down to get it to close. So it's actually quite hard to see given the footage I've taken, but the recline is actually not fully flat. In fact, it's roughly a 40-degree angle for your seat back, and the footrest comes out slightly, but it by no means is comparable to the A320 Singapore Airlines that also operates this route. So with that, we come to the end of my experience on board Vistara's A320 product, and I have some concluding statements and thoughts that I'd like to make. Firstly, I think we've got to first keep in mind the product that's being offered here. An A320 by no means is an easy aircraft to work with. It's quite a small aircraft. It's not designed for long-haul routes. However, I think a 6-hour flight is quite lengthy for an A320, and it's one that Vistara should really consider switching to a different aircraft, especially given that it's operated at such a late night, and you'd rather have a more comfortable seat. Moreover, the lack of a lie-flat seat is honestly quite disappointing, given that its main competitor and the parent company Singapore Airlines, which operates the exact same route, offers a much better product on board a much larger aircraft. Now, looking at the cost, Vistara's business class product is very much similar to the exact same route flown by Singapore Airlines for a very similar price. So given that both airlines are charging a relatively similar price, there's nothing that really differentiates Vistara for you to be choosing Vistara over Singapore Airlines. As mentioned earlier, the crew was fabulous on board, and I felt like they were one of the big highlights of this flight. But as mentioned earlier, the ground staff were quite poor and really took a long time with the check-in, which you do not expect on business class. Yeah, the hard product is not the best, and the seat does not recline fully, and it honestly felt pretty ordinary for a business class product. So Vistara does need to work on a few things if they want to be charging the same price as Singapore Airlines. And just before we land at Changi, I'd like to remind you all to please consider subscribing, as I'll be posting a lot of flight reviews in the near future. And that's the end of my flight review. Thank you all for watching. Please consider liking and subscribing. And until then, happy flying.